All right, let's take a moment to check in with the Old Movie Weirdo hotline, see if there's any whimsical nuggets to share. I wonder if Will's manning the line again. Let's check on that. It's been a while since we've talked to him.
Yo, this is the Old Movie Hotline. That was my...
You almost confused me there. I almost thought it was Sylvester Stallone answering the Old Movie Weirdo hotline.
We're still calling this the Old Movie Hotline, all right?
Yeah.
Old Movie Weirdo Hotline?
The Old Movie... That's the line you picked up, Will.
I have a lot of lines in my apartment. Now, here's my Sylvester Stallone imitation. Ready?
Yeah.
You know, you got a big mouth, you know? That's it. That's my whole...
That's the extent. Well, that's not too bad. All right.
Here's a funny story.
Yeah.
I in my other life as a corporate propagandist, I interviewed Sylvester Stallone at the grand opening of the Warner Brothers studio store on Regent Street in London, and this was, I don't know, like 20 years ago or something. And it was very stressful. It was for a video news release, so we were like, you shoot as much of it as you can beforehand, right? And then you roll some stuff on the opening night party. Then you run to an edit room, cut it all together, and it goes out back in those days by satellite. Now it's probably distributed electronically in some way. But so I was doing this pre-interview with him, and someone took a picture of me. And I came home with this picture and like gave it to my parents because I was like 20 something years old. And I was like, look, I've made it. I'm interviewing a real movie star. And my father was like, oh, that's a nice picture of you. Who's the other guy? And I was just like, oh, whatever. That's my Sylvester Stallone story. I hope that has made this recording worthwhile for you. Okay, this is a fucking cursed podcast. It really is.
Yeah, it really is. Right. It's like my kitchen. My kitchen's cursed. This podcast is cursed.
Do you want to share any of this?
I'm going to tell the whole thing. I'm going to share the whole story.
All right, let's just do it. You know what? Because I feel like this is good stuff, so let's just go.
Okay. I'm teetotaling tonight too. I've got a sore throat, so I'm drinking hot tea. This is a cinema shame first, I think.
I've been teetotaling for 25 years, so we're even.
Yeah. All right. Welcome to the Cinema Shame podcast. My name is James Patrick, and we have the return of Will McKinley to the Cinema Shame podcast. Say hi, Will.
Hello, America. Actually, this is potentially an international audience, so hello, world. Hello, world.
Yes. We would like to have a little bit of truth-telling. We're going to have a peek behind the glamorous podcasting curtain here for a second. We originally recorded this Bad News Bears segment to be a Old Movie Weirdo hotline segment during the first Rocky episode that we did. So that was 6 months ago.
Right.
The recording on that little event failed, and we had about 8 or 9 minutes of audio.
Did it fail, or did you just not have like a tape in the recorder or whatever you use?
Well, I had 9 minutes of it, so there's a tape in there.
Whatever.
Yeah, and then we recorded another Bad News Bears episode.
So we've done this. Is this the third time we've done this?
This is the third episode that we've recorded. Each one of them, I'm sure, has been top-notch entertainment. But we just keep redoing.
You know what this is like? This is like All in the Family. All in the Family, they did 3 pilots before they sold the show. Mm-hmm. So this is like, but you know what? By the time they got to that third pilot, their shit was so tight. Our shit is going to be so tight tonight. audience, look out.
But that's not even the whole story, because we did just the Bad News Bears segment, and they're like, oh, well, that was too good, too long to be just a Rocky bit. So they're like, oh, we'll talk about the sequels, and we'll have a chance to watch the sequels, talk about them competently, and then add them to what we'd already recorded. And we tried a number of months ago to actually make that happen, and that failed. We never actually recorded anything on that occasion, though. We
just were too busy in life.
It was an aborted podcast, and now here we are 6 months later. We're going to record the bit about the sequels, and just now, before we started recording, we decided just to do the whole thing over again for old time's sake.
And then you know what we're going to do? We're going to edit it all together like that Orson Welles film that's going to be on Netflix, where like they shot some of it 1 year and then more another year and then more another year. So the final podcast is going to be from like 3 different recordings. So you, the home listener, can try and figure out which is which. And that will be, I'm sure, extraordinarily enjoyable for you.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
it is for us recording it.
Right. And then the editing segment, the editing portion of this podcast is going to be a dream, I'm sure.
And luckily that's your job and not mine. So I'm thrilled to be here. I'm excited. So let's get to it.
There is no limit to what some men will do for money, especially a man like Morris Buttermaker.
No, I really appreciate this. It's just a damn shame that none of the fathers had the time for it. God knows if I wasn't so busy down in City Hall.
You got my check, Whitewood? Even if it meant coaching an unlikely group called the Bad News Bears. It was a team of superstars like Mike Engelberg, Rudy Stein, Reggie Tower, Ahmad Abdul Rahim, the incomparable Ogilvy, Timmy Lupus, Kelly Leak, the Aguilar brothers. With a team like this, there is only one way you can go.
Cups and supporters. Gotta be worn at all times.
No fair.
Comfortable. Well, either you wear them, get that one. Either you wear them or you don't play.
Walter Matthau is Morris Buttermaker, a man so desperate to make a buck that he did the unforgivable. He put a girl on the team.
Boys, I'd like you to meet your new pitcher, Amanda Wurlitzer.
Juice fixed niggers and now a girl? Rob a that, punk.
Tatum O'Neal is Amanda, but Amanda is no ordinary girl. And with her help, the Bad News Bears went from totally terrible to just plain bad.
Why don't you do this league a favor? You and the Bears just drop out.
Amanda knew what the Bad News Bears needed. She also knew how to get it.
If I win, you play baseball for the Bears.
And if I win?
Name it.
What if he tries something,
I know an 11-year-old girl who's already on the pill.
Don't ever say that word again.
Oh, well, if it isn't a puke. How'd you like me to stick this bat where the sun never shines, Turner? Sit on it.
But a little success is a strange thing. Once you taste it, you want more. And from just plain bad, the Bad News Bears climbed up the ladder to become the team that played baseball like it has never been played before. Academy Award winner Walter Matthau is the coach. Academy Award winner Tatum O'Neal is his secret weapon. Together, they turned the Bad News Bears into a team of superstars you will never forget. The Bad News Bears, the incredible story of how a disaster combined with a catastrophe and somehow became the greatest champs who ever played ball.
Well, this is the thing. It's like I'm a huge fan of, whatever, the underdog narrative. And I guess that's probably what I like the best about the first Rocky movie. And also there's, I'm a sucker for 70s movies, even though I'm the old movie weirdo hotline person. Like if you had to hold a gun to my head and say, we're going to destroy every existing print of every movie from every decade except one, which can you save? It would probably be the 70s. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm not the first movie fan to be like, oh, wow, the 70s are good. But, there's just something like, and they're so rewatchable. And like, particularly now where everything, including like the stuff that like my nieces shoot on their phones, everything looks like a slick Hollywood production. But in the 70s, you would get studio films that looked like rough, And they kind of roll like they were scripted on paper napkins sometimes. There's this roughshod approach to filmmaking. And the 70s really just had these fly-by-the-seat-of-your-pants films. Like, I'm thinking specifically of Rancho Deluxe, because I just watched it not too long ago. And that film comes together like nobody was paying attention to it. If I was writing this instead of speaking it, I would call it rough-hewn, Hewn, which is a word I would never speak because it sounds too writery. But, the most art happened in the 70s, the most, experimentation, that's the stuff that, like, I guess my two favorite decades are really the 70s and the 30s for very similar reasons, because they were learning, trying new things, pushing the boundaries. I probably enjoy 30s films more because they're more like emotional comfort food, but the 70s films are like challenging and exciting and, very different from what we see today. And that is one of the things that I really appreciate about the movie that you have asked me to discuss today, which is The Bad News Bears, directed by Michael Ritchie.
All right, boys, let's get back to basics. This is a baseball. The object of the game is to keep the baseball within the confines of the playing field.
Wait a minute. What wild throw? You don't think we know what a ball is? I don't think I like the kind of throw. Yeah. Come on,
You've been in enough fights this week already.
We keep playing like this, we'll be the laughing stock of the league.
Well, what do you expect? All we got on this team is a bunch of Jews, spicks, niggers, pansies, and a booger-eating moron.
Tanner, I think you should be reminded from time to time that you're one of the few people on this team who's not a Jew, spick, nigger, pansy, or booger-eating moron. So you'd better cool it, or we may be disposed to beat the crap out of you.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Come on, cut it out. Now, guys, somebody's going to pay for this windshield, and I think, Engelberg, it's going to be your father.
Bullshit.
Bad News Bears came out in 1976, and it was advertised in the back of comic books. You may be familiar with the ad for the movie, which was done by the Mad Magazine illustrator Jack Davis. So they were marketing this film to kids, and ads were in comic books. It was about kids. It was, set... it's about a little league team. Basically, the story of the movie is that there's a little league in, I guess, Southern California, and there are a collection of like sort of misfit kids that didn't get picked for any team who are left out. And the dad of one of the kids is a local politician who, creates a motion to essentially add an additional team for these misfit players. And inexplicably, he hires like an alcoholic pool cleaner. I guess not inexplicably because he is a former minor leaguer, but he is not a role model, right?
No, you could say that, yeah.
Played by Walter Matthau. And so, he drinks beer, he smokes cigars, he cusses, he, doesn't set a good example. But it all ends up well. It all ends up happily, and the kids bond, and they achieve what they need to achieve.
There's something I forgot to tell you guys. It's a league rule. Cups and supporters. Gotta be worn at all times.
They're very
comfortable.
Well, either you wear them, either you wear them or you don't play.
Can we stop this already? We got another hour of practice. Yo no voy a poner esto. Eso duele.
What? What are you saying?
I've been brushing up on my Spanish of late, and I think he's saying something about, his being Catholic and it's a sin.
Oh, for Christ's sake.
I know what it is.
This is a free country. Let's be democratic and take a vote.
There'll be no vote, Engelberg.
What about Amanda?
You ain't strapped one of these things on me.
Well, if she don't wear one, I don't wear one.
Anyway, it's too small.
If she doesn't wear one, neither do I.
What are you doing here?
Some asshole changed my mind.
I would really love to say that, I was there in 1976 in the theater, and I can share with the listeners, exactly what it was like to see it with a bunch of other kids. That's not the case. However, I did see it at Sleepaway Baseball Camp in what I think was probably 1980. So I would have been, 11 at that point. And I remember it was it felt very weird to me because there was all this cursing, and and all the kids, of course, found the cursing hilarious. And I was like, ooh, I wonder if my parents know that I'm watching this. And it was a little bit stressful. And here's a weird piece of texture. I was lying in a wheelbarrow when I watched this movie. We were at baseball camp, and it was totally low tech, but it was pre-video, so it would have been a 16 millimeter projector that they were running this on. And they just showed it outside on a sheet or a pull down screen or something. And there was a couple wheelbarrows that kids were using as basically it was the 1980 version of the plush recliner seats at AMC theaters. And so I had a blanket in a wheelbarrow, and I was laying in a wheelbarrow with a blanket. All of this is just to kind of set the visual picture for your listeners.
You had me at the wheelbarrow recliner image. I mean, that's pristine right there.
So imagine me in the middle of the woods up in the Catskills or the Adirondacks, somewhere in northern, upstate New York. Anyway, this is a lot of background and probably not all entirely necessary. But anyway, so
we're just weeding out some of the younger crowd that is calling this just pure fiction.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's when I tell things like this to my nieces are age 7 to 18, and when I tell them stories like this, they look at me be watching a movie on a 16 millimeter projector on a sheet in the middle of the woods while lying in a wheelbarrow at a camp that has no phone. I could say that, that I am from Mars and, have 3 heads, and it's a completely different experience. But I would argue the distinct memory of something like that is in some ways greater than the digital ubiquity of the current era. I don't want to get into before we even start about the movie, I don't want to get into it was better in the old days, but there was something special about that kind of thing.
It wasn't, well, I mean, you go back to it just wasn't easy to see movies. There was no accessibility, so the opportunities that you had were memorable. And if you're lying in a wheelbarrow in the middle of nowhere, watching in a sheet on the side of a barn, and that's a memory.
Damn right. Damn right.
Now these things, we have thousands of DVDs at our disposal. We have thousands of movies streaming, and there's no charm there.
I mean, look, if you had to pick. If someone said you could wave a magic wand and it could be the way it used to be when I was discovering movies in the late 70s and early 80s, or the way it is now. Obviously, I'm going to go with now because, there's quality is so much better, accessibility is so much better, and all of that is really, really important. But, there was a certain memorable specialness to things like this. Like, I think did I talk about when I saw like Rocky at a Boy Scout meeting, at a Cub Scout meeting last time? Yeah. So, and it was in the cafeteria, and I painted you a visual picture of the school cafeteria. So again, it's like, do you remember that? Oh yeah, I watched, Pitch Perfect 3 on my phone at the gym. Is that going to be the same memory? I don't know. Whatever. I remember I went to baseball camp regularly, and I remember specifically we had 1 year. This was in Missouri. So summers in Missouri are not pleasant, in case anybody wants to know. It's dank and humid, and we had like 2 nights that it rained constantly. So we were all crammed into the cafeteria to watch movies, and I'll never forget the movies that played. They showed Running Man, which I'd seen before. Interesting. But I was 11. I was 11, and then Dirty Harry. Holy mackerel! Dirty Harry was R. Oh yeah, it was. So was Running Man. Oh yeah. But yeah, I was, I remember vividly because I'm like, like you said, I think I'm going to get in trouble for watching this. Even though I knew at home, like my parents pretty much let me watch whatever I wanted. I had serious embargoes on things. So anything that I saw that was dirty at all always would be at my cousin's or whatever, But I certainly wasn't used to that permissiveness outside of my own house. I mean, I had friends who weren't allowed to watch a movie until it showed on television, so it was completely sanitized without a doubt. Yeah. So they had to wait to see anything. They weren't allowed to rent anything because the parents didn't want to watch it. They didn't want to pre-screen to know, I guess. So that was his thing. He never saw anything, and then he only saw it edited. That's crazy. And nowadays, like, kids can see literally all manner of content at the click of a button. So we both went to baseball camp. That's a nice piece of texture for the audience. It helps, I think, lend us some credibility here. Well, yeah. I mean, I played Little League from like age 6 up until high school, and one of the things that, I love about the Bad News Bears is there are long stretches of the movie that don't feel like a Hollywood movie. It feels, I'm not going to say it's like a documentary because that's such a cliche and it's not true, but it feels like my Little League experience. Like, everybody cursed. Everybody shit-talked each other. Everybody got into fights. The coaches were, often kind of like, broken down and would either like drink or smoke. I mean, this is like whatever. We're talking about late 70s, early 80s. So different world, right? But, it was not the sort of like scrubbed, sanitized version of, even of the, like the 2005, remake. So it's always, the movie has always had a special place in my heart, in part because I had built up such a expectation of seeing it from, seeing the ad in my comic books in 1976 and then finally seeing it at camp, like 4 years later. And in rewatching it for all of these various recordings that we've done, like, I don't like the term holds up because there's a lot. That's a very freighted term in ways that I'm not. And it's a frame of reference. I mean, something it could be
you could say that it doesn't hold up based on the acting style or the way that they play baseball. I mean, there's so many factors that go into any movie holding up.
Yeah, and I just holding up is never a term I will use. But in 2018, I found it as enjoyable, and all the things I liked about it, I still liked those same things. For me, it's the best baseball movie that I've seen, but more importantly, it's the best slice of life of, the Little League experience of that era.
I mean, it feels organic, and that's
totally.
That's another one of those terms that gets tossed about, like documentary. But when you look at the way that the team is constructed, it feels haphazard. It doesn't feel like someone sat there plotting out who had to be in the team and what kind of
God. And they have
stereotypes
kids,
you needed. And
like in the first movie, they cast a couple. Now, I mean, I'm sure people today would look at it and be like, it's not as diverse as one would like, and the little diversity that is actually there is, sort of played for laughs, like the two little, Mexican kids can't speak English and blah, blah, blah. But what strikes me when I was watching it is that there are like a couple kids who look almost exactly alike. And nowadays you would never do that because somebody in the studio, somebody in the boardroom would be like, oh, you can't cast two like bleach blonde kids with long hair. People are gonna get confused at who they are.
Yeah, and then when you get to the sequels, they remove one and add another. Like it's a little odd.
Totally. Watch me now drop my second Pitch Perfect reference in the first 10 minutes of this podcast, showing that I'm a contemporary and aware person. So I watched the Pitch Perfect movie on the plane coming home from some job somewhere, and I was struck by the fact that, like, in the core group of girls, right, there's like a couple of them that don't say anything, and then I was like, well, you have to do that because you can't have 10 principal characters in a movie. So one of the things that's great about the first Bad News Bears movie is that the kids who you need to remember, you remember, right? Mm-hmm. And the kids, like, for example, Brett Marks, who's Gummo Marx's grandson, which would make him Groucho, Harpo, and Chico's grandnephew. Like, I don't think he has a scripted line in the entire first movie, but he's there and he does stuff.
Yeah.
And you're happy he's there, but, like, you don't have to know all of them, and they don't all have to have, an elaborate sort of constructed, reason for being there or a backstory or whatever. It's a little bit different in the second movie because the second movie is so much more about the kids.
Yeah, well, I think it's the nature of any sports movie, really, unless you're talking about, a singles competition like golf or tennis. When you
right.
get one, you're looking at a sports movie. You've got an assembly of anywhere between like 5 to 11 people or something on that you need to pay attention to. So if you spend too much time with everyone, you've spent not nearly enough time with any of them. And with this movie, we get a taste of every one of the characters, even without the speaking lines, as you say. Like, they're not just background. That's why the first one succeeds as it does, because we have 3 main stories, and they're all interesting as the characters develop. We have the Walter Matthau character, the Buttermaker, how he turns his personal situation around through the team and Kelly Leak, and then Amanda. They're not participating on the team for the same reasons. They each have something to prove to someone.
Yes. And, of course, Amanda Wurlitzer is played by Tatum O'Neal, who at that point had just done, I think, Paper Moon.
Yeah.
Oh, well, no, only Paper Moon in 73. So, and like words do not exist. First of all, Paper Moon is like, we're not talking about Paper Moon on this podcast, but that is a hell of a movie. And if you have never seen that, go get that movie right away. But Tatum O'Neal is so good in this movie, and the genuine rapport that she has, and Walter Matthau is so good in this movie, and the genuine rapport that those two characters have, there is no doubt whatsoever when you are watching this movie that these two people have a history with each other, right?
Yeah.
And the history being that the Walter Matthau character, Buttermaker, dated Amanda's mother, and it didn't work out, but he had a sort of vaguely, like step parental role with her.
And that's something you can't plan that kind of chemistry between two completely disparate people. I mean, Matthau is at the tail end of it. Well, not the tail end, but I mean, he's at nearing like the last third of his career, well established now as a Hollywood legend, and we've got this brand new young girl who's made one movie.
Will you listen to me and forget the elbow?
Gotta hold down the swelling.
It's not that
Used to happen to me all the time.
Buttermaker.
All right, shoot.
Well, I invited my mom to the game tomorrow.
You did, huh? Well, that's nice.
It's the last game of the year, you know.
Yeah, fine.
Got a big surprise for you after, too. We're all going to dinner.
What?
And after that, we're going to the drive-in movie. It's a double feature.
Let's play it by ear, see how things go tomorrow.
Please don't try and blow it. She wasn't too keen on it at first. I had to work real hard to get it set up.
Yeah, I bet you did. I don't think it's a very good idea, Amanda.
No excuses, Boilermaker. It's all fixed, and I'm paying, so you can't cry poor.
Yes, but listen.
Last Sunday made a killing. Guy wanted to wallpaper his bathroom, bought 35 maps.
Amanda, you know damn well that your mother and I don't get along, so we're not going to dinner or a movie or anywhere else together. Do you understand? And just keep your elbow in the water.
Well, then just you and I'll go.
Yeah, right. You and I will take the whole team out, get some hamburgers or some pizza or something.
Well, I was just thinking us.
Just us, no outsiders.
Well, then maybe we could go horseback riding or something, and maybe to a matinee.
Yeah, we'll see. How does it feel?
Why do you always change the subject? You're always pulling that
As
number
far
on
as
me.
I'm
Just
concerned,
quit
the
it.
subject is your arm. You're pitching tomorrow.
But what about after tomorrow?
After tomorrow, we do what all ball players do. We shake hands till we see each other next season. Then we go fishing or hunting, make some personal appearances, get to know the wife and kids again.
I don't have a wife and kids.
Neither do I, but I got my pools to clean. You got your maps to sell and your ballet to learn.
I could help you with your pools.
Will you cut it out, Amanda?
No, it wouldn't be like you taking me anywhere. It'd be like work. You could use the help.
No, I couldn't. And besides, you shouldn't be wasting your time cleaning pools. Look, Amanda, you're a terrific kid. You shouldn't be hanging around with me. I mean, I'm an old, broken-down, third-rate ball player. I like to drink too much. I like to smoke my cigars without anybody bothering me, including you. I'm happy that way. I'm a bum.
No, you're not. You taught me how to pitch. You taught me how to...
Ah, damn it! Can't you get it through your thick head that I don't want your company? If I did, I would have looked you up 2 years ago. I wouldn't have waited 2 goddamn years.
Interesting point about this movie is that do you know who wrote it?
I don't think I do offhand, actually.
I'll give you a hint. No, I'll tell you. It's all right, so this is how I'm connecting it to my Old Movie Weirdo hotline.
All right, lay it on us.
Okay, the guy who wrote the movie is the son of one of the greatest classic film stars ever. That's your first hint.
Steve Guttenberg?
Yeah, right. Second hint is that the character of Buttermaker, the alcoholic coach, is based on this classic film star. Ready? Da-na-na-na-na-na. So, all right. Time's up.
I don't know.
The answer is Burt Lancaster. Now, Burt Lancaster's son, Bill Lancaster, wrote this movie, and he sadly did not have a long career or long life. He died when he was 49 years old of, I think, a heart attack. Did not write a lot of movies. The one other big credit for Bill Lancaster is John Carpenter's The Thing. And apparently, after The Thing flopped, he and Carpenter were both removed from Firestarter because they were supposed to do Firestarter together. But
so wait a minute. So the failure of The Thing at the box office, which is now considered one of the greatest horror movies ever made, ended the career of Bill Lancaster for all intents and purposes.
For all intents and purposes. I mean, he's got other credits.
They're all Bad News Bears credits, according
well,
to
yeah,
this.
he's credited for like the character, although he did write. So Bad News Bears was 76, and in 77 they made a sequel called Bad News Bears and Breaking Training, which is one of the most unwieldy titles, second only to perhaps like The Incredibly Strange Creatures Who Stopped Living and Became Mixed Up Zombies, which is an actual title. But
I love that entered into the conversation today.
Look, then run for your life. Incredible is the word for the world's first monster musical. See in magnificent Eastman color, the daring, dancing, enticing, and horrifying. The incredibly strange creatures who stopped living and became mixed up zombies. From the innocence of music and laughter comes the twilight of terror.
It's not a baseball movie like Rocky's not a boxing movie, you know? And people, I feel like people have the wrong idea about what Bad News Bears is. It's not, even though it's about kids playing baseball, it's not a baseball movie. It's not a vulgar, even though it's a comedy with vulgarity, it's not a vulgar comedy.
It really does follow a traditional narrative, too. I mean, we talk about it in terms of baseball film and winning the game, but it's really not about the game. It's about overcoming the assholes that are sticking it to you in your life. I mean, and that's what it is. I mean, the kids have obstacles, and succeeding as they do is their way of overcoming the guy that won't let him ride his bike around the field, and the girl with the father issues, and Buttermaker's got plenty of issues, but they all come together and they win by losing.
Every story needs to have an arc, right? Every character needs to have an arc. The arc that these kids follow is so genuine and so organic, and it ends so perfectly in a way that is true to life, true to the movie. And it just, you feel it in your soul, right? It's like it helps maybe if you've ever played organized sports, and, I'm the worst, like, antisocial misanthrope you probably know, but I will never forget that sort of feeling of camaraderie that you get. It's like foxhole buddies, when you're 9 years old. It's your little league teammates.
Well, for the most part, I think films today are made by morons for morons. With certain exceptions, of course. Today, the average producer gets a group of analysts from the Wharton School of Business take a survey in Scranton, Pennsylvania, of girls who are pregnant between 17 and 24, whether they would like a film about snakes. If 82% say that they would probably not care to see a film about snakes, then they won't make the picture. What about incest? 83% no. Well, then they don't do Hamlet.
You know how in IMDb they have like the trivia section? Usually in the trivia, this section they'll have, it was like, it was shot in 3 days, and the director's mom made pasta for everybody.
The essential tidbits.
Right. These like quirky little tidbits. So this is something that is in the IMDb trivia section. Has come under fire lately for being politically incorrect. parentheses. The movie has its characters use the N-word to refer to African Americans, the S-word to refer to Hispanic people. The characters make nasty comments about Jews, women, and gay people. And this is a movie aimed at children. So this is in the trivia section.
That's definitely pub fodder.
And so this is what just makes me fear for the, like, I am the most woke, late 40s white man.
Put an asterisk on this podcast, and the one in which Will used the term woke correctly in context.
So, I feel very strongly. I try and be, sort of fight my, Long Island kind of redneck, religious, grew up in the 70s, all those like negatives, like white male, basically I'm just persona non grata in the world today. But, and I really, really try to, to sort of be aware and sensitive and respectful. But seriously, shut the fuck up, IMDb commenter, with your bullshit, because this is why we can't have nice things, right?
No, this is true.
This is why, and even just the whole conversation about Gone with the Wind, while I understand why it's happening and where it came from, it furthers this overall narrative that old movies are problematic and thus should be avoided, period, full stop. And this is just the worst thing ever.
It just takes a little more time. You can't just show it and leave it. I mean, there's conversations that need to happen, but it's important to have those conversations, and it's still important to see the movie.
Why does basically all media act like movies don't exist before, like, the late 60s? Part of the reason is because every single movie made, I don't know, before now, or let's say before 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, has something problematic about it because the era in which it was made
doesn't align with contemporary
values, mores, respectfulness, language, whatever. So if you're gonna call attention to, if today it's gonna be, Gone with the Wind, so, and I don't even want to debate that because it's like there's a lot in that movie that that needs to be contextualized. But the point is that once you create a narrative that old movies are problematic, TV channels are basically just like, it's not worth it. It's safer for us
to just show Hallmark movies all the time and we'll be done with it.
Yeah. And to show the shitty 2005 remake that if you Google or if you search on IMDb or even probably Wikipedia, it comes up first before the original. And, and it says 2005 versus 1976. So guess what? For a good portion of the audience, they're going to be like, oh, yes, this is more relevant to me because it's more recent. Because everything about our media, everything about the way we regard old movies in the world now basically says it's old, it's worthless. And that is just such a profoundly sad reality. Don't watch the 2005 version of Bad News Bears. Watch the 1976 version. And, if you need to explain to your kid or whomever you're showing it to, disclaim it all you fucking want. But just, watch the original. Don't watch the remake. And as old movie fans or as movie fans, period, full stop, we need to stop this sort of like squishy discomfort with everything. It's like, be who you are now, be enlightened, be, respectful, and appreciate art in the context in which it was created and as a slice of life of the era in which it was made. And whatever. So we've gone on a huge sort of tangent, but
it's all related. This is all very Bad News Bears. It's all important to the conversation.
In 1976, the Bad News Bears became the most unlikely candidates for baseball's Hall of Fame. It was the story of how a disaster combined with a catastrophe became an instant hit everywhere, as well as one of the funniest movies of the year. Now, the boys that almost destroyed the great American pastime will continue their fun with the Bad News Bears in Breaking Training.
Don't assume anything. That way you won't make an ass out of you or me.
They're up to their old tricks. And a few new ones as well. The Bad News Bears are going to the Houston Astrodome to play the biggest game of their life.
Are you clowns gonna sit on your butts all day? Are we gonna play some ball?
The Bad News Bears in Breaking Training. And the bases are loaded with laughs.
People never talk about the second movie. And the second, in doing this, in prepping for this podcast, I went back and rewatched the second movie, and it is so good. I mean, if anybody listening to this is going to go and watch stuff because of what we're saying, watch both of them. They're on Amazon. I'm sure they're on Apple and wherever else you do your VOD. Watch both of them back to back because the second movie is the rare sequel that feels like a genuine, organic continuation of the story, not like how can we figure out a way to redo what we did in the first one and charge people money for it.
The second one is such an interesting case. It's so easy to dismiss sequels.
Yep.
Without really ever giving them a shot.
Another interesting thing about the second movie is that the lovely theme song called Our Time Is Now, parentheses, looking good, close parentheses. Uh-huh. The lyrics to that song are written by Norman Gimbel, who wrote the theme songs to Wonder Woman, Angie, Laverne and Shirley, and Happy Days.
Wow.
Now that's quite a pedigree.
It is. It's an amazing tidbit too.
And it's just a fun little like catchy, cheesy, 70s song. It gets you right in the mood, and it's a good like road movie kind of driving song. Anyway, and the best lyric from it is, if we just stay loose now, we'll come out all right. And if there's no more 70s like. No. Just chill out, man, and have a good time. And not that I've taken that advice in my entire life, but and also in the second movie, look for some fun. If you're into 70s baseball, look for some fun cameos from 7 different Houston Astros players and the manager, Bill Verdon. And they're also wearing those sweet, they're not throwbacks because they were really their uniforms then, but those sweet Astros throwback 70s uniforms.
Well, with the hair too. I mean, the hair on all those guys was pristine.
Yep. And it's just, and it's just like they kind of just wander out like and just sort of pop up in the movie, and, nobody gets like a single close up or anything. It's just a little bit raggedy and kind of fun. And like after they win the game, there's like you want to know what, like, here's another microcosm, like what I love about movies of that era. After they win in Breaking Training, the kids are running back into the locker room, and Kelly, Jackie Earle Haley, stops to get a drink at the water fountain. And so the editor waits for Jackie Earle Haley to finish getting his drink and run out of frame before he cuts. And there's like a good 2 or 3 seconds of that. And I was like, God damn, they would never do this nowadays. Because someone in the boardroom or the screening room would be like, you got to cut to the next scene, you know? That was just a nice little raggedy moment that I enjoyed.
I think the second one suffers because it gets lumped in with the third one, which is just a complete travesty of a movie.
Yeah, the third. Okay, so I almost didn't get a chance to watch the third one, and true confession, full disclosure, I watched it like on my phone between work and when we started this call. So, and yeah, there was a fair amount of sort of like jumping ahead. I had watched it recently when we were going to do this the last time. So, but I never saw it in the first run, just ignored it like the rest of the world. There is a ton of stuff. I mean, it's a bad movie, period, full stop. But there are
there's moments that I really like in that movie, though. It's just surrounded by just a mess.
If you like Sweet Smell of Success, and since I'm an Old Movie Weirdo, I'll hit you with an old movie reference. If you like Sweet Smell of Success with Tony Curtis and Burt Lancaster, you will like elements of Bad News Bears Go to Japan, and you will like it in a sense even more because there's a behind the scenes connection of Bad News Bears Go to Japan and Sweet Smell of Success in that the son of Tony Curtis's co-star in Sweet Smell of Success wrote both the first and the third Bad News Bears movie. He did not write the second one. He wrote the brilliant first one and got like a Writers Guild Award. He wrote the terrible third one, but what he did was he essentially made the third Bad News Bears movie a sequel to Sweet Smell of Success, because it's not a Bad News Bears movie. It's a Tony Curtis movie with the Bad News Bears in it.
It's remarkably baseball-free.
When America introduced them to baseball, the Japanese adopted it as a way of life. But that was before the Bad News Bears Go to Japan. Now, the most successful kids in movie history leave America and set out to conquer the world.
It's all right, guys. Take off your shirt.
Can we take them to our room?
Now, how do I know? Do I look Japanese?
What do I do about the tennis shoes in my bag?
Put them in your purse.
What?
Marvin, if I take off my shoes, I'm going to get athlete's foot.
Well, that'll be the only part of you that is an athlete.
And before they're finished, the greatest little team in the world will think it just went through World War III.
Go get him, gang!
They demolish the great American pastime at home.
Whip it in there, baby!
Now watch what happens when they strike out in the land of the rising sun.
Gracias.
And now they've started a worldwide epidemic of hilarity as they take on a new culture.
It's very weird and unsanitary.
Get involved in high finance.
2.5% of profits?
Yes, 2.5%. Everybody gets 2.5% of
Well, it
profit.
should be 5.
What? 5? What are you talking about? John Wayne don't get 5.
Learn the facts of life.
You have to get naked.
Well, not completely, no.
That's good, because when all my babies ain't getting naked no how. I ain't no fool.
You're certainly not.
Fall in love. And tackle Japan's national hero.
Now, take it easy. Now, easy.
Tony Curtis takes charge of America's wildest export. When the Bad News Bears Go to Japan.
You're gonna get it
It's like there's a baseball game in the last 7 minutes of the movie. And the whole rest of it is Tony Curtis basically playing Sidney Falco.
Yeah.
I mean, he uses the same phrasing, the same cadence, the same scams. It's crazy. And so everybody's assignment, not only the only way you're allowed to watch Bad News Bears 3 is if you watch Sweet Smell of Success first. And you can run some parallels between those two, because that's the only reason you're going to have any interest in Bad News Bears 3. Otherwise, it's terrible.
Well, you kind of feel sorry for Tony Curtis for being in this movie on one hand. It's hard to explain what exactly goes wrong without watching it and just explaining the whole thing. But it's aimless, and it really kind of removes the kids from the movie. But at the same token, it does that by focusing on the Tony Curtis character. So while you're watching a Bad News Bears movie, like you said, it's really about this character trying to scam his way into a lucrative TV deal by peddling kids in Japan. It's sort of convoluted. And there are some wonderful little things in the movie. What sticks out to me is the Dick Button commentary on the wrestling match, when he can't do anything but compare it to figure skating, so all he does is keep making figure skating commentary over Tony Curtis getting pummeled by the Japanese wrestler.
My favorite moment in my rewatch was there's what feels like a almost like a sort of improv scene between Tony Curtis and Ahmad's younger brother. So there's, like I said, they added some younger kids.
His name's Mustafa. Yeah.
And like Mustafa, for some reason, asked Tony Curtis about like kissing and do people need to get naked when? And it's a bizarre scene. And Tony Curtis is so good. I mean, people forget. Like, for people roughly our age, you know, who grew up in a time when Tony Curtis was a has-been and was in, like, chintzy stuff, people forget that Tony Curtis was a big fucking movie star. Yeah. And he earned every minute of his fame. He was a talented guy. He was a genuine talent. And his comic timing is great. And that scene with the kid – it's a great scene. It doesn't save the movie, but it's a high point.
It's like I was saying, there's individual moments where, like, that's really good, and I wish I had a more consistent flow of that. The relationship that he has with Mustafa is kind of interesting. Like, all the kids are just berating Tony Curtis throughout the movie. They're treating him like garbage, deservedly so. But the only kid who comes to his defense is Mustafa.
Yeah.
And they have this interesting relationship where it's always the two of them kind of hanging back and chatting, and that conversation about having sex and do you have to get naked like I said, it comes out of nowhere, but it's kind of a priceless moment. And there's a few of those throughout the movie, but it doesn't come anywhere close to redeeming what is just a mess.
In the second movie, the kids want to go to Houston to play an exhibition game with the Texas State Little League champions, and they come up with this scam where they convince their parents that the groundskeeper at their Little League field is their new coach and is going to drive them to Houston.
Hello,
and
how are you?
Yeah, and exactly. And instead, the oldest kid, Kelly, basically steals a van and drives them all to Houston. It's like a combination of a road movie and sort of kids movie and baseball movie, and it's just totally fun, and it works in so many different ways. And then in the third movie, the remaining kids, because a couple now are gone, see something on TV about whatever, like a Japanese kind of exhibition game with the Japanese kid team, and they need a way to get there, and Tony Curtis is down on his luck, needs money to pay off a loan or debt or something, and he scams the kids and takes them to Japan to get the money, and gets there and doesn't have any money and gets into all manner of strange things because he doesn't have any money. And Then they do finally play baseball at the end, but in like the perfection of the baseball climax in 1 and 2 just demonstrates how imperfect and not well thought out the baseball climax is in 3.
The sentiment is there, but it doesn't pay off.
No, it doesn't pay off at all.
I thought this was something I needed to bring up too. In the third movie, when the Bad News Bears first play the Japanese team as like an exhibition thing, and they're getting spanked, and the TV guy walks away and says they don't want anything to do with it. He tells Tony Curtis that nobody wants to see the Bears get beat that badly on live TV taped or on the news, and he says, "What about Rocky?" And
yes, I remember that.
Says, Rocky landed a few punches.
So they knew this is like the prequel to the Cinema Shame podcast. 40 years ago, they knew that you were going to draw a parallel between these two movies in your
1978. Yeah.
In your podcast, exactly 40 years to the year.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And it also has if anyone's keeping track of the Rotten Tomato score of any of the movies that we do, not that you would, it has a 0% rating. 0.
Oh, Go to Japan?
Yeah, 0.
That's not fair, Tony. If you love old movies, Tony Curtis at least deserves a couple points. It's totally
worth watching. It's totally worth watching for Tony Curtis, and it's totally worth watching because the Japanese coach is, I'm going to butcher his name, but Tomisburo Wakayama from the Lone Wolf and Cub series.
Interesting. So, so that's. So I feel like we may have, like, there may be enough for a book. Like, you and I could do. I was going to say like 40th anniversary, but that already passed. So maybe
the 40th of Goes to Japan. Well, we could sell the. I mean, I guess it's underrated if it's getting 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, because it's something I'd watch. You know, I don't regret watching. I enjoyed it.
Just not good.
And I think, and also some of this, I go back to the direction to the 3 films, because we start with Michael Ritchie.
Michael Ritchie, by the way, coming off of a movie called Smile,
which is fantastic.
Which is fantastic with Bruce Dern, and it's like behind the scenes at like a beauty pageant, and it has that, you know, sort of, it feels real quality, that same, you know, realism that Bad News Bears has. And when you got a guy who does that twice in a row, that's not a mistake. So,
well, he had a really good string there throughout the 1969 to 1976. I mean, Downhill Racer, Prime Cut, The Candidate Smile, and Bad News Bears. I mean, those are all strong, you know, we're talking about the realism, but there's a cynical and self-aware sense of humor that runs through.
Yeah, and I'm gonna give a shout out to Fletch, which is by far my favorite Chevy Chase movie. Fletch is a movie like Chevy Chase. In theory, I find him kind of tiresome, but like every time I watch Fletch, it makes me laugh.
No movie was better made for Chevy Chase than Fletch, and I think Michael Ritchie completely understood how to get the best out of him in that role. Michael Ritchie might be one of the greatest underrated filmstories of the 70s and 80s, because he I mean, the run I listed before, but Diggstown in '92 is also a really fun sports movie. It's got that same cynical sense of humor going for it. And then Couch Trip, which is a movie I really like, with Walter Matthau.
Oh, I never saw that. So he worked with Walter Matthau again.
That's Walter Matthau and Dan Aykroyd, Charles Grodin.
You know, the sleeves in this jacket are awfully long. I always like to show a little linen at the cuff.
Burns, you're a smartass, and you'll always be a smartass. You know, your smartass is going back to prison.
They won't take me.
Oh, you convinced them you were crazy. You were. Eating paint chips off the windowsills and licking dust off the tops of radiators.
Well, that part was easy. Then I got really carried away. You know, paper clips, plastic forks, Kleenex, Naugahyde.
An epicure. Good. I think I can arrange a loaf of bread, a jug of water, and thou licking the floor of maximum solitary.
I'm impressed, Dr. Baird. You have quite a way with words. One would think you'd be thought of around here as a poet, instead of an ignorant, puffed-up smidgen of blowfish shit.
But yeah, we go from Michael Ritchie in the first one, and his style of filmmaking very much reflected the type of film that he produced with Bad News Bears. Coming out of that, the second movie doesn't have the same cynicism. There's a couple times where I don't mean to say cynicism as like the movie is like a big old pessimist, but it's more like you're talking about. It kind of blends into that realism, a down to earth quality. And in the second one, we lose some of that as it does become more of a movie oriented towards kids. I feel like Bad News Bears, the original film, was an adult movie that featured kids. Kids can identify, but it was really meant for an adult audience looking back on that time. The second one is a kids movie. The kids are on their own. They're being self-sufficient and driving to Texas to the Astrodome. Some of the language has been toned down again. I mean, this is much more of a PG movie than the original. And the director for that was Michael Pressman, who
and this is another deep cut that probably a lot of people maybe haven't seen. I saw it on TCM a number of years ago. So anyway, it's called Those Lips, Those Eyes from 1980 with Frank Langella and Tom Hulce. And they showed it on TCM during one of Ileana Douglas's like lost treasures or whatever she called it. Like she did a sort of festival of movies that she liked that most people hadn't heard of. Those Lips, Those Eyes, 1980. And it's about sort of like behind the scenes at, sort of like a summer stock company. Good movie. And then he also did some kind of Hero with Richard Pryor.
He made a name for himself with the Great Texas Dynamite Chase. I don't know if that was his first film, but that was the earliest film of which I was aware of him. And then shortly after that, he did this, I believe.
Yeah, and by the way, both he and the writer Paul Brickman, who was also the writer-director of Risky Business, they were both like 26 years old when they did Breaking Training. So that's, the guy who directed Go to Japan was like twice that age. He was, well into his, into his career.
He directed a Richard Basehart movie early in his career. So if that
he directed, Tension, the film noir Tension from 1949, and also the great elephant movie Maya with Clint Walker, which became a one season TV series in the 60s from MGM.
I guess my point of going into the Pressman and John Barry was the name of the guy that directed the third one is that they didn't have a voice anywhere near as consistent as Michael Ritchie. Pressman also directed Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2: The Secret of the Ooze. That shows you how his career arced. Dr. Detroit is in there somewhere too, which is another, it's funny, but it's a mess. But where are we going? Second movie. That succeeds at the end for different reasons. As I said, we're talking about how it's a self-sufficient kids movie, and at the end of the film, when they finally get to playing the big showdown in the Astrodome, there's actually a rather iconic scene which I had totally forgotten. I mean, I guess I had logged it away in the files in my brain. And when they play the first two innings, and so the game is supposed to be played between a doubleheader for the Astros. And the umpires called the game after two innings because they said they're running out of time and need to get the other game in. And they hauled the kids off the field, and because the Bears were losing, they said, "Oh, you lost." And the little, I keep forgetting his name, the Napoleon Complex kid.
Oh, Tanner Boyle.
Yeah, Tanner. So he's standing out there all by himself in the massive Astrodome, having his let them play speech. Like, he's not leaving. It's a really nice moment in that movie. It's the moment where he's like, oh, emotional swell. And I'd totally forgotten that was that movie.
Let them play! 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 Let them play!
I mean, there's some interesting things happening in Breaking Training. Like, they use Newt Rockne All-American as a sort of like structural guide. So like early on in the trip, when they're in a hotel room, completely on their own with no adult supervision, total dream for every 11-year-old boy, right? Or whatever. Tanner is up late at night watching old movies on TV, and he watches Pat O'Brien in Newt Rockne All-American and gets the idea that they have to win this game for their fallen comrade, Timmy Lupus, who broke his leg and is sitting home in bed.
Win one from the Gipper.
Yeah, and there's a lengthy scene of Pat O'Brien doing his speech in the locker room in Newt Rockne All-American, and I was sitting there saying, can you imagine if somebody pitched that in a studio film nowadays? You're going to have an 11-year-old boy and his teammates alone in a hotel room after one of their team members has just gone and gotten 3 Playboys from the 7-Eleven, and their older teammate stole a van and drove them across the country smoking all the way down there. And he's going to watch an old movie in black and white and quote it. People would be like, are you kidding me? And that's just an example of how, in a sense, one of the things I remember very clearly about being alive in the late 70s is that old movies were not this weird niche-y thing that, your strange friends, liked. They were part of life. They were, a thing that were on TV and that people watched and that people knew about. And you could go to bookstores and see books about W.C. Fields and the Marx Brothers, and right there in the, as you walked in. And I just get a little uncomfortable when, I don't know, entire decades or film history is just, is dismissed because the world was different then than it is now.
Yeah.
That's just absurd to me, and there is something, honestly, there's something exhilarating about watching these kids, say offensive things and drink beer and, smoke and the kind of thing that now it's it would never, one of a conglomerate owned Hollywood studio would just never do it.
No.
It would, I mean, from the fade up of Bad News Bears, you're like, I know this is going to be good, because it doesn't, I mean, even just compare the fade up of 1976 Bad News Bears to 2005 Bad News Bears. It's exactly what was so great and perfect about the 70s. That sort of kind of yeah, it's a studio movie, but it's not, perfect. It's not flawless. It's, and then you compare it to 2005 where everything is perfect, everything is flawless, at least in terms of like the look of the production.
Right, and that speaks very clearly to the different places we were in in filmmaking. The 70s, that was all about you keep going back to the gritty realism, but that's the common word tossed about there. But it just wasn't scrubbed, squeaky clean like it. Like there's a look to a Hollywood movie in 2005 that you can instantly pick out. Well, that's been manufactured in a factory, like it's pushed out to sell to a mass audience. In 1976, there's no indication that they made this with the notion that millions of people are going to watch it. It's like they had a film they wanted to make.
Yep.
It seemed like a good idea at the time, and they made it.
And, and we should mention that the 2005 remake, like, do you want to tell the listeners, who directed it?
Well, this mindless remake was made by Richard Linklater, who has a passion for baseball, who is a very talented director, and who makes small films.
And who makes movies, frankly, that have some of the qualities that we're both talking about liking in 70s movies. Why the hell he didn't use that skill set in this Bad News Bears remake is thoroughly beyond me, because the 2005 Bad News Bears remake, which, by the way, is the first one you find whenever you search for Bad News Bears anywhere, which is a fucking travesty. Yeah. But it's not a good movie. And there's a lot of reasons why it's not good. But for my money, the biggest reason that it's not good is because they decided to change the character of the coach of Buttermaker from a sort of like schlubby, dowdy, 50-something, alcoholic, down on his luck, who you imagine goes home to a shitty apartment, and has a pretty sad existence. They took that character and they turned him into this sort of like fit, sharp, hip, like Chuck Taylor wearing, like, stripper banging, like hipster. And, he ends up like hooking up with one of the kids' moms and, and basically says to her, yeah, this happens to me all the time. So why the fuck should we care about this guy, right?
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, it's a Billy Bob Thornton caricature. Like we're not tapping into the same humanity that we had with Walter Matthau, and he was. I mean, I don't know if I could pick someone to convey that character better than Walter Matthau, though.
No, and that's why. I mean, it's sad that he didn't come back. Like, can you imagine, if he had agreed to come back for? Honestly, I do love the second movie and think it works great. But imagine how much he would have, changed the third movie. But yeah, he is perfect. He is just perfect.
And I don't have a problem with William Devane in the second movie. I like him as an actor too.
He's great, and he plays the scenes with the two of them, with Jackie Earle Haley and William Devane. That is there's some genuine stuff going on there.
Yeah, he's really good in those scenes, and I thought that he elevated that movie.
Totally.
But yeah, if you want to watch perhaps Richard Linklater's actual Bad News Bears, you need to watch Everybody Wants Some.
This ain't high school, man. You're at a new level here. You have not earned teammate status yet.
Who the hell are you? Oh, Jake Bradford.
And until you do, you're nobody.
Excuse me. Yeah. Bye.
I'd like to introduce you to the new guys. 2 rules. No booze in this house. Number 2, no girls upstairs in those bedrooms.
seriously worried about these new guys.
Play a good game, man.
We have a little tradition welcoming the new guys. Freshman batting practice! Welcome to the big time, boys.
That is much more in line with what made Bad News Bears so successful. It is really such a personal. It's not even like a movie. It's a series of vignettes about this college baseball team, and there's a lot of the same philosophy going through the way the two movies are made, and it's kind of offbeat, and it's a little bit raggedy and raunchy at times, and it's got a real heart to it, and there's really hardly any baseball played in the movie, but it's just about the camaraderie between the students that are on this team. It's a wonderful movie, very funny, very well scripted. I don't know why nobody seemed to see it when it came out or caught on like Linklater's other movies, but I thought it was tremendous, and I think part of it has to do with it being a sports movie again. It's very easy for sports movies to get written off as sports movies,
right?
And it's really a shame when a movie that really has nothing to do with sport, even though it's in the background, gets labeled as that. But definitely watch Everybody Wants Some! by Richard Linklater from, I believe, 2 years ago.
You want to in microcosm. Here's the difference. There's a lot of differences between 76 and 2005 versions.
The director of School of Rock.
They don't know the fundamentals of the game out here.
You play your game, we'll play ours, Ray.
Play ball! If you're tired of being counted out,
You guys suck.
this is your team.
What happened to you, Tanner?
Gonna fight.
With who?
The 6th grade.
This is your coach.
Is he dead? He's drunk. He took a vote. You don't want to play no more.
I haven't been as good a coach as I can be. But I know I can do it, because I know this game. You with me?
And this is your chance.
Sister Sledge, that kid's got an arm on it. Who is that?
That's Kelly Leak. Well, I heard he broke some kid's arm. I heard he spent 2 years in juvie.
Is that all you got?
Hey, listen up. This is Amanda Wurlitzer. She's our new pitcher.
Ain't you ever heard of throws like a girl? No, I never heard that. I think I just entered puberty.
This summer.
Don't you feel good when you go up there? It's like when you get a chick that you didn't think you could get, and you got her, and you're like, just get a hit, buddy.
It's good to be bad. Billy Bob Thornton.
In all my years, I gotta tell you, this is my favorite team.
Hey, what time you get off work?
Bad News Bears.
I'm tied, guys. I know a tie's a lot like kissing your sister, but the way we've been coming along, it's more like kissing a really hot stepsister.
Look at so there's a line where at the very end where the equipment manager character hands Buttermaker the losing trophy. Sorry, we just spoiled it, audience, but
Buttermaker, this is your second place trophy. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. I know we had our differences, but at least we settled it right here in the ball field. My boys would like to say something to your team. Boys?
We just want to say you guys played a good game. And we treated you pretty unfair all season. We want to apologize. We still don't think you're all that good a baseball team. You got guts. All of you.
so when the equipment manager hands Buttermaker the trophy in the first movie, sorry, I'm cracking myself up. Walter Matthau says, "Thank you, sir," and because she's kind of a butchy, sporty woman, but he throws the line away like a fucking genius, and it's so funny. And maybe it's offensive, whatever. At me on Twitter. I'm almost fucking 50 years old. Cut me some goddamn slack, but it's a funny line. And in the 2005 remake, Billy Bob Thornton says that line like it's posted on a billboard on the highway. It is just like it's the difference between the two movies in microcosm. Funny little throwaway line versus trying to be funny. There's so much shit in the remake where they're trying to be funny. It's
like a sitcom pausing for the laugh track, you know.
Yep, totally. Because if you're interested, like if you listen to our conversation, you're like, oh well, I should watch it, or it's interesting to be aware. Watch it for that reason.
You could even watch I don't recommend like picking it up and watching it on its own, but if you're interested in what we're talking about and how the movies are such a stark contrast of the same story, just in the way that they're done, you can watch the opening, the introduction of the characters. So watch the introduction of the baseball players and Buttermaker, and then watch the end. I don't even think you need to watch the middle. You can see there's enough wrong in, there's enough wrong in there's a crack joke in the first 3 minutes of the movie. It's like immediately it's hack, right? It just whatever. It's just not a good. It's a very confusing thing for fans of Linklater. It's a confusing, disorienting movie to watch because even acknowledging that he did School of Rock, which is a glossy.
I like School of Rock, by the way.
It's a completely enjoyable film, and he can work in that mold. I just don't know if there was certain outside pressure to make this movie something that he didn't make. It's just so strange. Anyway, that's another topic.
Okay, so if you're keeping notes at home, everybody wants some Sweet Smell of Success. Bad News Bears 1 and 2. Didn't I say something else too? Was a must watch.
We talked about Smile.
Oh, and Smile, yeah. So all those you have to watch.
And I'll toss in The Couch Trip there for the bookend of Ritchie's filmography, because I think that's probably the last time he was really.
Oh, and Fletch.
Michael
Fletch.
Ritchie. Yeah, well,
also Fletch.
If you haven't seen Fletch, shame on you.
A lot of people haven't seen Fletch. Fletch is,
So, what's your name?
Fletch.
Full name?
Fletch. F. Fletch.
I see. And what do you do for a living, Mr. Fletch?
I'm a shepherd.
Officers, could you excuse us for a few moments?
Hey, why don't you guys go down to the gym and pump each other?
Footnote of Fletch. I was watching Fletch when I found out that Princess Diana died.
Well, that's a sad footnote.
It was my freshman year in college. We were watching Fletch, and we stopped it for some reason to turn on the television. I don't even know why we did, and that's what was on the television was that news. And then we, as good college students, were like, well, that's shitty. And then we went back to watching Fletch.
For breaking training, a couple things to look for. Clifton James has a nice little supporting role. Everybody loves Clifton James.
Sheriff J.W. Pepper.
Boys, sort of secret agent.
Secret agent? On whose side?
Yep, you would be the person to make that reference. He and I, no one else. I guarantee you, 100% of your audience will not get this reference. He played Stryker Bellman on the soap opera Texas, which was a spinoff of Another World that ran from 1980 until 1982 on NBC, and I watched every episode.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
I don't know where I read this, but I read that Michael Ritchie had a daily contest during the filming of Bad News Bears that whoever came up with the best ad-libbed line for that day of shooting was rewarded with, I can't remember what the prize was, but there's a lot of lines that are just on set ad-libs because of his bonus perks.
And that totally reads, as a viewer, you totally get that sense. And that's part of why I think it's, such an enjoyable film, because it seems real, it seems unscripted, it seems natural. And there's even first of all, the casting in this movie is brilliant. And I looked up who casted it. Jane Feinberg and Mike Fenton, who also cast E.T., Poltergeist, Space Camp, and The Goonies. So these two casting directors, Jane Feinberg and Mike Fenton, know how to cast good, realistic, believable kids. So I would pair Bad News Bears with, and this is going to initially sound like an odd comparison or odd choice, but the 1938 Michael Curtiz movie Angels with Dirty Faces, which has James Cagney and Pat O'Brien as a neighborhood thug and his buddy who turned into a priest. But the way it's similar is that it's about this sort of ragtag collection of neighborhood kids who are unified by a sort of anti-heroic authority figure.
Next time you roll a guy for his poke, make sure you don't know your hideout. How'd you know? Come here, suckers. Hey, how do you know this place so good?
Yeah, how do you know?
I'm trying to show you. Here. Look at this.
Oh, Rex.
Hey, you ain't Rocky Sullivan.
Rocky Sullivan?
Wow.
How'd you get that? It's Rocky Sullivan. And we tried to hook you. What a boner.
Yeah, I guess the minute you saw us duck down the alley, you knew he was heading for the hideout.
Yeah, and I took the old shortcut. What they call you?
Soapy's the name. This guy's Bim. This mug here's Swing. This blue cup here's Hunky.
Hi, Rocky.
This guy might...
And I'm Pasty. And this guy's Crabfish. We just call him Crab for short.
Who
Hi.
would not be able to achieve the whatever personal growth that they experience with a traditionally heroic authority figure. And obviously Angels with Dirty Faces ends in a very, very different way than Bad News Bears.
But yeah, that's a great idea. I never would have thought of that.
But yeah, so that's a good, if anyone actually is listening to this show, did people listen to this show?
Well,
I guess
the statistics tell me that they do.
At least they start and then they fast forward. But,
right. Well, I don't have to worry about them. I just know they started.
But anyway, so if anyone does watch these two movies back to back, at me on Twitter, at Will McKinley. And also, by the way, I have to throw in a plug for the excellent film historian and writer Alan K. Rhodey, who wrote a new book on Michael Curtiz that just came out, makes a lovely Christmas gift for the Old Movie Weirdo on your list. And also, I would, if you're going to do a double feature, I would also throw in some Our Gang, because there are extreme similarities between the naturalism of these kids in Bad News Bears and the naturalism of the Hal Roach kids in Little Rascals. So add this to your list of things you have to go, media you must consume after the conclusion of this podcast. No problem. I also don't want to neglect to mention some very good supporting roles in the first film. Vic Morrow, the always reliable character actor, Vic Morrow, plays the Yankees coach, the sort of bad coach and or bad person who is a good coach or is coaching a good team. And again, he looked and acted exactly like so many coaches that either I had or played against in Little League. It was almost scary at times. He's got a really good and believable dynamic with his son, who is the Yankees pitcher, played by Brandon Cruz, who people, if they're old and ancient like me, will remember from Courtship of Eddie's Father, the TV show. And, there's a nice little moment in the original film where, Brandon Cruz's character either intentionally or unintentionally throws at the Engelbert's head, and Vic Morrow's character gets really mad at him and comes out and gives him shit for it. And it's interesting because the film presents Vic Morrow's character as being all about winning and sort of driving the kids and being everything that's wrong with organized sports with children.
Mm-hmm.
But then he gets mad at his son for arguably for playing hard, and that's a nice character building moment because, like, if he was really a bad guy, he would have been like, good job, son, for intimidating the fat kid, So I thought that was a nice, real, and genuine moment. He was like, don't demean the game by throwing it at the opposing player's head. Now, was he too much in his expression of that to his son? Yes, he was. But that was a nice moment.
Well, it brings him out, the character out of the realm of caricature. I mean, that's why this movie works so well, is because these aren't flat, two-dimensional shorthand.
Totally. So anyway, that's really it for Bad News Bears. Great movie. Go watch it. Do a double feature with Angels with Dirty Faces. Watch it on Amazon with the with the subtitles. Show it to, if you have kids, boys or girls, doesn't matter. Good for girls too, because it's got a positive, it's like there was not a lot of female heroes in movies in the 70s, at least, movies made for kids. And this movie, I mean, while she's not necessarily the hero of the film, she's certainly front and center and is a, tough, smart, capable, badass, realistic 11-year-old. So just all around great film. Watch it.
Sounds good. Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming back on and spinning some yarns with us.
Chosen wisely.